I'm Stroitza, and a little while ago, I made this video.
Holy Jesus. What is that? What the fuck is that?
And at the beginning of this video, I mentioned a short list of shows in the beloved Transformers franchise that I greatly enjoyed. Many of the greats, such as Animated, Armada, and Prime were among them. But yet, there was one particular show that was missing from that list that quite a few people quickly noticed. And they made sure that I did too. So, you don't like Beast Wars? You need to watch Beast Wars. Wait till they get into Beast Wars. You should do Beast Wars next. I would love to see your opinion on Beast Wars.
You might also like Beast Wars.
You should give Beast Wars a shot. Watch Beast Wars, you coconut. The show's on YouTube for free in 4K. The people have spoken.
I love democracy.
And so, I began on my path to atone for my great sin of not having seen this exalted classic. For those of you who may be looking at the footage on screen and are thinking, what in the world is this? This is Beast Wars, one of the most highly praised Transformers shows of all time. Oddly enough, the opinion that Beast Wars is one of the best shows in the Transformers franchise is an incredibly popular one. Despite the less than impressive graphics, its execution of plot and characters are often considered so well done that many modern shows are unable to compete. Many of its longtime fans herald it not only as a fine example of storytelling, but of characterization as well. So, in anticipation of the release of Rise of the Beasts, I figured that you and I could take a look at the original material together and see if it's really worth all its weight. So what is Beast Wars? Beast Wars Transformers, or as it was known in Canada, Beasties, was a 3D animated TV show that debuted in the year of 1996 and ended in 1999. It ran for a total of 3 seasons, the first of which ran for 26 episodes, whereas the latter 2 ran for 13 each. It is, by its very existence, exceptional. As one of the first computer-animated TV shows to hit the screens, and the very first computer-animated Transformers show, Beast Wars was an incredibly revolutionary piece of media during its production. A sequel series, Beast Machines, was created shortly after Beast Wars' finale, although Beast Wars and its characters have remained a phenomenon in the Transformers franchise since. Beast Wars was remarkable for its time, but there are many Transformers fans that would argue that Beast Wars is remarkable still, some even going so far as to say it is their favorite Transformers show of all time. But let's be real here. People are often swayed by nostalgia, and one could argue that any show that aired in the pre-2000s is more likely to be praised via nostalgia bias, rather than through genuine analysis. After all, the beloved G1ers of the Transformers community are well known for their devotion to the original show, which, although is endearing even to the likes such as myself, is not typically considered the pinnacle of storytelling.
You disgust me.
So let's get into it. For this video, I'm actually going to be changing up my format a little bit compared to my last one. For the analysis of the plot and its quality, we're actually going to go through the plot itself together, and along the way I will point out its various flaws or intrigues. This will allow us to get a closer look at Beast Wars' major plot points, as well as make the video and its content a little more accessible for those who haven't seen Beast Wars or don't intend to. So strap in, and beware of major spoilers ahead. Beast Wars is actually a continuation of the original Generation 1 timeline. Set about 300 years into the future, the Great War between the Autobots and the Decepticons has come to a conclusion, with the Autobots' victory and liberation of Cybertron. Both factions have evolved into the 2 organizations present in Beast Wars, the Maximals and the Predacons, respectively, and are currently in a somewhat tense alliance. Don't be fooled, however. Despite the change of names, the Maximals behave like Autobots and the Predacons behave like Decepticons. Their values and behaviors, as portrayed frequently in previous shows and many shows following, are the same. That aside, we open with the Predacon ship, the Dark Side, being pursued through space by the Maximal vessel, the Axelon, through a strange portal that spits them out above an unidentified planet, where the resulting firefight between the two subsequently damages both ships and causes them to begin plummeting down to the planet's surface. Due to the damage to the Maximal vessel, its cargo of stasis pods is scattered into the orbit of the planet, which contain the protoforms of what are essentially unborn Maximals. We come to learn that this planet is rich with energon, the material that the Cybertronian race once needed to consume in order to survive. In Beast Wars, its raw form is very powerful and severely damaging for the metal Cybertronians to be near, and due to this planet's large concentration of it, both the Maximals and the Predacons are forced to take on semi-organic alternate forms, aka beast modes. Don't ask how it works, it just does.
It just works.
Once they have taken on their beast forms, we are introduced to both the Predacons and the Maximals, who contain no previously known characters aside from their leaders, Megatron and Optimus Prime. Or Optimus Primal, as he's called in this show. These two characters are not the original Megatron and Optimus, however, but rather their successors and namesakes. Due to the crashes, both sides find themselves stranded on this mysterious primordial world, with no way of contacting Cybertron for any assistance. At the Predacon ship, one of Megatron's men, Dinobot, is severely unsatisfied with the results of their sudden and violent crash into this planet and, while ranting about how Megatron has failed to lead them to Earth, decides to challenge Megatron and shortly after, switches to the Maximal side for the rest of the show. For the most part, anyways. It turns out that the reason the Maximal ship was pursuing the Predacons in the first place was because they'd stolen a special golden disc belonging to the Autobots. Maximals. They're called Maximals now.
All this for a golden disc.
It was Cybertron's most carefully guarded relic, Rat Trap. It gave the location of a major energon source. That's why Megatron stole it.
The Axelon, an exploration ship, was the only Maximal vessel capable of following the dark side for some reason, which was equipped with a transwarp drive, a technology that allows it to travel through time and space, thus explaining the portal at the very beginning. For a significant portion of the first season, we mostly just see the Maximals and Predacons taking pot shots at each other, trying to kill and foil each other's schemes. This serves excellently for introducing us to our characters and establishing the teamwork and dynamics between them. Plus, it's a solid way to keep the fun and action going. The primordial world and its animal denizens are established, and we get familiar with our cast and their various attributes. Remember those pods orbiting the planet? Throughout the show, a few of them manage to lose altitude and crash down to Earth. This is used to introduce new characters, as the protoforms automatically begin to scan for animal forms and awaken once they're on the ground. While the protoforms are technically Maximals, the Predacons are able to reprogram a couple into Predacons, evening out the two factions throughout the course of the show. While the majority of the first season is based on the rivalry between the two sides, around the second half of the first season, a third factor is introduced. A mysterious alien race seems to have a presence on the planet, in the form of anomalous constructs and locations, with bizarre and powerful technology, first manifesting as a probe appearing in a strange stone circle, and one such case in the form of a floating island, possessing an obelisk of remarkable firepower. The Maximals are curious as to the desires of the aliens, whilst the Predacons are interested in controlling their formidable power. The Maximals and Predacons proceed to get into a conflict over the floating island, which results in its imminent destruction, causing it to send a signal into space. The signal then appears to contact the closer of the two moons orbiting the planet, boding ominously for the Transformers. Things begin to take a rather sinister turn when the Predacons discover another golden disc with mysterious markings on it, presumed to be belonging to this alien race. When Megatron has some time to study the disc, he takes a great interest in his new discovery and calls for a truce between the Predacons and the Maximals. Amid rising concerns about the possible alien threat, when yet another anomalous construct is detected by the Maximals, Optimus Primal attempts to speak with the aliens when rescuing Air Razor, who was trapped inside said anomalous construct. He is successful, allowing us to see this alien race for the first time in the shape of an ethereal being, taking on the form of the head of Robot Satan. His conversation is not terribly fruitful, however, as the being merely expresses displeasure at the Transformers' work in tampering with their technology, and explains that the Maximal and Predacons' conflict on the planet has disrupted the aliens' project, and that this project must now be destroyed. Newsflash, we get to see these guys later, and what they actually look like, and they're a lot more terrifying in their normal form. To the viewer, at least. This isn't a criticism, really, because seeing Robot Satan is probably one of the most terrifying things to Optimus Primal. But geez, they're kind of nightmare fuel normally. With that cryptic message, it is then revealed that the closer of the two moons, the one that the obelisk signal had reached, is not a moon at all, but rather the Death Star, another alien construct.
That's no moon. It's basically space aliens.
Which, given time, will wipe out the entirety of all life on Earth via sudden global warming.
How dare you!
Both the Predacons and Maximals begin to understandably panic once they realize that the Death Star is planning on firing down on the planet with its heat beam. In a last-ditch effort to save the planet and the Maximals, Optimus Primal travels into space on a cobbled-together stasis pod to kamikaze into the Death Star's exhaust port. And they didn't even have to steal any plans. The resulting destruction of the Death Star sends out a powerful transwarp explosion, which sweeps across the planet and out into the depths of time and space. Both the Maximals and Predacons are rendered unconscious by the explosion and, when they awaken, find that some of them have become mutated into special transmetal forms by the explosion, mechanical versions of the animals they previously represented. And that brings us into Season 2, which begins on a bit of a somber note. Once the Maximals have gathered their wits and gotten used to their new looks, they face the difficult issue of Primal's death. As when the Death Star exploded, so did he. Rhinox is able to come up with some bullshit way to bring him back, and in the meantime, we are introduced to a couple new transmetal characters via the stasis pods. Meanwhile, Dinobot takes a moment to look at the new world this run-in with the aliens created. Not only is the surrounding land now desolate and barren from the effects of the heat wave, but now there is only one moon in the sky. Suddenly, Dinobot is struck with the realization that this planet is indeed Earth, after all, and his presumption that Megatron had led them to the wrong place was entirely incorrect. He had, in fact, gone back in time to purposefully land on prehistoric Earth. Dinobot manages to infiltrate the dark side and steal both golden discs. Wait a second, What? Dinobot manages to infiltrate the dark side and steal both golden discs. Just like that? Huh? It was that easy? Why haven't the Maximals done that yet? Now that you mention it, why don't the Maximals do anything? We're about to learn that basically our good guys would have never had a chance without Dinobot in this show, but this is one of the reasons why. None of the Maximals do anything offensive except to rescue their own and to protect themselves. They're on the constant defense, and they keep letting things get taken from them when the Predacons don't exactly have the tightest security on the dark side. The Maximals literally have Rat Trap, a character who is a stereotypical rogue, like from Dungeons and Dragons. He's made to sneak and steal and sabotage, and yet Dinobot's the only one who does it? Oh, and by this point, folks, we are in the second season. There was an episode in the first season where the Predacons were believed to be dead, and the Maximals are strolling about in their base, and not once did it occur to anyone to get the golden disc. We've got time to wave Tarantulas' legs around, but actually do any work? Nope. The Shakespeare references were pretty baller, though.
Hey, gotcha!
Where did you find these?
Just over there.
Alas, poor Tarantulas. I knew him, Cheetor. This is the leg that stalked so many victims. That it should come to this.
Aw, do you need a hug?
Really, nigga?
Anyway, Dinobot steals both golden discs. He seems to be aware of some tremendous power that it holds, but it is not revealed to us at this time.
To be or not to be, that is the question.
He then hides the golden record beneath a rock before returning to the Maximal base, presenting to them the alien disc. Oh yeah, the Maximal disc? It is a golden record. And not just any golden record, but rather the sounds of Earth. An actual golden record that was sent aboard the Voyager 1 into space, containing snippets of human culture with the hopes of reaching alien life. Now thoroughly troubled, Dinobot finds himself in conflict over the strange revelation he has received about the golden record, and seems to believe that the ultimate outcome of the Beast Wars is Megatron's victory. As a result, he chooses to side once more with Megatron, who accepts him back to his side under the condition that he return the golden record. Reluctantly, Dinobot agrees, bringing Megatron to the hiding place of the record, where they are interrupted by Rat Trap, who along with the rest of the Maximals was unaware of Dinobot's betrayal. When Dinobot finds himself unable to execute Rat Trap, he comes to his senses and decides he wants no part in Megatron's victory. The Maximals accept him back into their ranks, although the relationship established between him and Rat Trap is never quite the same.
Rat Trap?
Go for booting up cold!
Shortly after this incident, the Maximals Airraiser and Tychotron discover a hidden green valley amid the barren land created by the Death Star. Enamored by its beauty, they enter the valley only to be suddenly attacked by aggressive vines. Before Cheetor's very eyes, a strange force blasts them into time and space, into places unknown. Rest in peace, you lovebirds. The Green Valley turns out to be yet another alien construct, transforming into a somewhat saucer-like craft. During these events, Megatron's forces are able to infiltrate and steal the alien disc from the Axelon. This culminates into a showdown at the saucer between the Predacons and Maximals, during which Megatron is able to use the disc to get inside the alien construct. At its heart, it turns out the alien disc is, in fact, a control panel for the craft, and Megatron immediately commandeers the ship, with the plan to victoriously return to the Predacon Alliance, with ship and Maximal prisoners in tow, as a symbol that the Predacons have the power to rise up against the Maximal-controlled Cybertron and reignite Robot World War II. He is foiled. Megatron is frustrated at the loss of his massive advantage and possible end to the Beast Wars, but has yet another card to play, the Golden Record. On a cliff above a green valley, we are finally given some context to Dinobot's Shakespearean musings, as it is revealed that the Golden Record has the power to see into the future. Megatron has reason to believe this will give him a significant advantage in the Beast Wars, understandably. Because the Great War between the Autobots and the Decepticons was greatly tilted in the favor of the Autobots due to the human race, it is Megatron's plan to eradicate Earth's primates in an attempt to wipe out the human race and see to it that the Autobots never made contact with them. He and his underlings begin to burn the valley and attempt to slaughter the early humans. Dinobot, racked with guilt over his betrayal of his Maximal friends, seeks redemption and solace, knowing that as a former Predacon, he would never be able to return to Cybertron. After nearly committing suicide, he then embarks on a solo mission to stop Megatron and his troops from destroying the humans, in which he is successful but is gravely wounded. With the last of his strength, he is able to destroy the Golden Record to keep its power out of Megatron's hands. He reconciles with Rat Trap with his last breath and delivers one of the best dying speeches I've ever heard.
Tell my tale to those who ask. Tell it truly, the ill deeds, along with the good, and let me be judged accordingly. The rest is silence.
He lived a warrior and died a hero.
Meanwhile, remember that transwarp explosion? The Maximals believe that once it reaches Cybertron, Cybertron will be able to track its location and find them to bring them home, which is also something I don't quite understand. The Maximals are over 4 million years into the past. What makes them think that the transwarp explosion of the past will reach the Cybertron of the present? I know it's a transwarp explosion, meaning it can traverse time and space, but why do the Maximals not only act like it is a certainty, but appear to be correct? Why doesn't it hit past Cybertron, or some other timeline Cybertron, or even all Cybertrons? Well, anyways, the transwarp signature is intercepted by a Predacon Alliance outpost, whereby the Predacon Alliance is able to divert the signature from its path to Cybertron, seeing to it that it never reaches the Transformers planet. Instead, it is revealed that the leaders of the Predacon Alliance, the Tripredicate Council, is incredibly displeased at Megatron's independent actions and wants to see him eradicated. To do this, they send a special agent from one of their ranks to Primordial Earth. This special agent being none other than the former Decepticon Ravage. Yes, that Ravage. After Megatron initiates an all-out attack on the Axolon, the Maximals are rescued by Ravage's well-timed arrival, driving back the Decepticons and explaining his presence to the Maximals. Driving back the Predacons, and explaining his presence to the Maximals. Working together, the Maximals and Ravage are able to subdue the Predacons and capture Megatron, who Ravage takes aboard his ship. While Ravage is interrogating him as to his motives, Megatron reveals that his arrival on Primordial Earth was not simply for Energon, but was motivated by a message inscribed on the Golden Record by the original Megatron. Megatron then reveals a fragment of the Golden Record still intact, and plays the message for Ravage, revealing G1 Megatron explaining that this message is for any remaining Decepticons in case they lost their Great War. G1 Megatron's plan dictates that any remaining Decepticons, or whoever else succeeds him, travel back in time to Earth, although the full message cuts out due to only being a portion of the record. Ravage seems convinced that the current Megatron's motives are correct, and he turns on the Maximals in favor of helping Megatron. Oh, and during this whole exchange, we find out that Tarantulas is a member of the Predacon secret police, which explains why he works against Megatron half the time. Which is kinda neat and an interesting turn for Tarantulas' character, but why does Megatron keep him alive after learning that? While Ravage may be convinced, Tarantulas definitely isn't. We learn later that he has no allegiance whatsoever to the old Decepticons. He proves himself to be both competent and dangerous, and I have no idea why he wasn't eradicated the moment Megatron was back in power, considering whatever the Tripredicate is planning conflicts directly with Megatron's plans. The Maximals are able to combat the now rogue Ravage, and Rat Trap is able to infiltrate and destroy his ship, as well as Ravage himself. Imagine being a Generation 1 Decepticon and getting beat up by a rat. Elsewhere, the Predacon Black Arachnia has been sent on a special mission by Megatron, but is intercepted by her Maximal love interest, Silverbolt, who after some scuffling with, decides she likes him enough to take with her. After some digging, they find themselves in a volcanic cavern, housing a massive ship that is none other than the Ark, an Autobot ship containing the greatest of the Autobot heroes. This links Beast Wars, once again, directly with the G1 storyline, which begins with the Autobot ship being pursued by Decepticons, crashing into prehistoric Earth, and sending its inhabitants into a stasis until the volcanic eruption in 1984 awakens them again, restarting the cycle of the Transformers story. They are intercepted by Megatron, who forces Black Arachnia to let him inside the Ark, since earlier on in the season, she stole the codes from his database. She relents once Silverbolt is threatened, and Megatron proceeds to enter the Ark, where many familiar Autobots and Decepticons are caught in their long-term stasis, which according to this episode will last 4 million years, until 1984 arrives. Megatron believes that, if he kills the original Optimus Prime, the Great War will conclude with the Decepticons' victory. The Predacons and Maximals would no longer exist, due to the severe change in the timeline, but neither would the Predacons be subjugated under the Maximals any longer. He blasts Optimus Prime's head with a powerful shot, causing a massive time storm to occur as Optimus Prime's spark begins to fade, causing our heroes to fade as well as their timeline begins to shatter. The larger story begins to make some amount of sense. Megatron stole the golden record because it had a message from G1 Megatron on it, as well as being a guide to Energon, I presume because Earth always has a massive stash of Energon on it. The message was for any of Megatron's successors to travel to prehistoric Earth and end the war at its source, completely altering the flow of time. While we never get to hear the rest of G1 Megatron's speech recording, I think it's a safe assumption that current Megatron's actions are directly influenced by it. This marks the end of Season 2, on that cliffhanger. Now, on to the third and final season. The Maximals are able to ward Megatron off and come up with a plan to repair Optimus Prime. To do this, Optimus Primal removes Prime's spark and fuses it with his own, causing him to mutate into a much larger and even more metal frame. While Rhinox repairs Prime, the Maximals rush back to the Axelon, which after having been left unattended was being attacked by the Predacons. They are unable to save the Axelon in time, however, and the Predacons manage to dump it into the river below. The Maximals are able to repair Prime and restore the timeline, but decide in order to protect the timeline, will need to guard the Ark. Salvaging the remains of the Axelon, they make a base inside the Ark's cavern, now joined by the newly reformed Black Arachnia. Next, we are introduced to Depth Charge, a Maximal hailing from the present timeline. In pursuit of the Predacon Rampage, who once destroyed his colony, Depth Charge is sent through a space anomaly and arrives at prehistoric Earth. He saves Cheetor from being drowned, but refuses to join the Maximals and holds a grudge against Primal for allowing Rampage to escape, though he shortly gathers his wits and decides to join them after all, during a fight in which the Predacons manage to steal Sentinel from the wreckage of the Axelon. Sentinel. Sentinel is a specialized AI program that Rhinox built to defend the Axelon way back in the first season. It's an incredibly powerful program that encompasses a variety of both internal and external protective measures, such as shields, weapons, booby traps, locks, death traps, etc. A whole episode of the first season is dedicated to the difficult task of disabling Sentinel when it is accidentally triggered before the program is finished, making the system rogue and violent towards its own occupants. This episode is a showcase of Rat Trap's abilities as the party rogue, but also a showcase of just how deadly Sentinel is. Rat Trap is the only character who could possibly be dexterous enough to make it through its various dangers. I mention this because aside from the outside shields, Sentinel is never used towards anyone but the Maximals themselves. The few times the Preds do infiltrate the Axelon, Sentinel is disabled and unable to defend them. We get a whole episode dedicated to how deadly Sentinel is to our heroes.
Why?
And then the Predacons steal it and install it into the dark side, which is the last we see of it until the dark side gets destroyed later on in the season. Honestly, a waste of a rather powerful piece of technology. I'm not sure why Sentinel got such a back seat, considering how useful it could have been. Now the story gets complicated again. While continuing to try and wipe out the human race, Megatron clones the Velociraptors back into existence, and sends them to try and kill the early anthropoids, although the Velociraptors prove to be unstable and the Maximals are able to suppress them. Megatron, now in the search for a better solution, discovers a blank protoform and decides to experiment with it. Using a piece of alien technology, presumably the same aliens as before, he builds a strange construct that, when paired with a piece of Rampage's spark, creates an advanced transmetal creature, which creatively turns out to be a clone of the late Dinobot. When Depth Charge and Cheetor attempt to thwart them, Cheetor is caught in the energy core of the construct and is transformed into a Transmetal 2 electric boogaloo. Depth Charge takes him for dead, but takes the Transmetal energy core back to his own hideout, When he attempts to dispose of it in a nearby lava pool, Black Arachnia intercepts it stealthily, taking it for her own. Cheetor's transition into a Transmetal 2 springs him into cyber puberty, and causes his beast mode to become a bit feral, taking some time to adjust and reconvene with the team, although he eventually does. Black Arachnia, now possessing the energy core, covets the Transmetal power and attempts to use it on herself to transform into a Transmetal 2. Instead, the core affects her system fatally, leaving her with the uncomfortable choice to either shed her Predacon shell and become a reprogrammed Maximal, or to become a blank, a fate implied to be worse than death. Choosing to become a full Maximal, Rhinox prepares the risky procedure, while Black Arachnia gives the Ark's access codes to Optimus Primal, in case she is unable to make it through the reprogramming. She is able to pull through it, albeit with some intense plot armor and tisms, and she, too, gets a new skin. Catching wind of Black Arachnia's unfortunate condition, Megatron makes the correct assumption that Optimus has the codes to the Ark, and takes the opportunity to attack the base and seize them, having Optimus Prime lured out into the open and then shot with a virus created by Tarantulas, to allow Quickstrike to take control of him. So, quick question. If it was that easy, why didn't they do that with Black Arachnia in the first place? Did she never go outside? I mean, the Maximals go out on patrols frequently, and Tarantulas always has some kind of gadget or technology to get things done with. Was there really no other way to get the codes off Black Arachnia? Like, none whatsoever? Once Megatron has access to the Ark, he decides he will merge his spark with the original Megatrons in order to have an even stronger form, like Optimus Primal did with Optimus Prime. He is successful, but while he is undergoing his transformation, Quickstrike and Tarantulas dispose of him in a lava pit and begin to initiate a self-destruct sequence on the Ark. Well, that escalated quickly. Megatron is not killed, however, and the merging of his spark with G1 Megatrons transforms him into a dragon. Yeah, a dragon. Not sure how that logic plays out, but yeah, it looks cool. So, I understand that due to Quickstrike's treachery, Megatron never got the chance to kill G1 Optimus Prime a second time. But firstly, since Primal was under Quickstrike's control, why wasn't Megatron's first instinct to have the codes transferred to him? I get that he was excited, but the past, present, and future are at stake here. Secondly, why does Megatron think that taking G1 Megatron's spark, which is a Transformer's literal soul, will not cause catastrophic consequences for literally everyone, including the Decepticons in the future? Does he intend to give it back? Primal gave Prime's spark back but kept the cool body, but Megatron is not concerned whatsoever about having G1 Megatron's spark and carrying it around like a bag of jelly beans?
Why?
Speaking of the timeline, remember Tigatron and Airraiser, who got yeeted into the sky by that alien flower back in the second season? We finally get to see them again. They've been captured by the aliens, who merged their sparks to create Tigerhawk, a being that is an amalgamation of the two.
I am Tigerhawk, emissary of the Valk.
Wait. The what?
Emissary of the Valk.
Tigerhawk. There are children watching.
Of the Valk.
We also get to see the aliens themselves for the first time. They're called the Valk, and they're pretty pissed about all the timeline craziness that Megatron has been inducing lately. Taking G1 Megatron's spark, trying to kill Optimus Prime, going back in time in the first place. They don't like it one bit, so they send down Tigerhawk as an emissary to destroy Megatron. To be honest, I don't understand what the Valk's role is in the Transformers universe. We never get to find out what their project on Earth was about, and aside from nearly exploding the planet via the Death Star, the Transformers messing with it didn't do anything major to the timeline. While the Valk are very interesting and having a third-party danger in the first season is certainly intriguing, their existence in the Beast Wars boils down to a whole lot of whys.
Why?
Why do they care about the timeline, when it's all about the Autobots and Decepticons? And if they cared about the timeline, Why did they try to destroy the Earth, which would absolutely mess with the timeline? Why are they on Earth, and what is the purpose of their project? We find out that they're the reason there's so much energon on Earth. Why would they do that? Why do they kidnap Tigatron and Airraiser specifically, especially when they're the ones with the most respect for nature and the Vox projects by proxy? Why do they make so many weird constructs? And why can they be controlled by non-Vox? Especially since the Vox appear to be a psychic race, from what little we see of them. There's no real reason for their constructs to even have controls. Why do the Vox know that Megatron is messing with the timeline, but don't know that killing him would also mess with the timeline? Are they omnipotent or aren't they? The Vox don't make a whole lot of sense and remain an enigma for the entirety of the show's runtime. This isn't necessarily an issue in and of itself, but their presence mainly serves as a convenient way for the Maximals and Predacons to fight some more or gain new technology or powers, in the case of their transmetal forms. Megatron and his troops are no match for the Vox power, and get quickly laid low by Tigerhawk. Tarantulas, working on his own, is able to capture Tigerhawk, with the hopes of harnessing the Vox power. He explains that he doesn't care if the timeline gets messed with, because neither he nor the Tri-Predicate Council are descended from either the Autobots or the Decepticons. Even if they are destroyed, he will live. He sucks the possession right out of Tigerhawk, but Cheetor's interference causes the machine to malfunction and turn on Tarantulas, who subsequently explodes and dies in a sudden but satisfying end. Tigerhawk is welcomed back to the team as an old friend, despite the fact that he doesn't remember them fully. And with that, we get into Beast Wars' 2-episode finale, which I will go through in greater detail. We start with Optimus reading the Robo-Bible, in which a series of events, much like that which just occurred, was recorded.
And a mighty warrior came down from the sky, and a rainbow was upon his head, and his feet as pillars of fire. And the great dragon was cast out onto the earth, and his followers were cast out with him.
What in the 7 spiral galaxies are you jabbering about?
Meanwhile, the Predacons are poking about the remnants of Tarantulas' hideout, where they discover a secret hatch leading to an underwater trolley. Though the Maximals aren't far behind, the Predacons board the trolley and find themselves on the short road to the Nemesis, the Decepticons' warship and the ship that shot down the Ark in the first place. It turns out that Tarantulas has been working on the Nemesis for quite some time, and it is now equipped with functioning Predacon controls and a transwarp device. Tracking them into the sea, Depth Charge faces off with Rampage once again, for what will be their final battle, as Depth Charge is finally able to defeat him. Using a shard of raw energon, Depth Charge pierces Rampage's spark, finally destroying it once and for all, as well as the piece embedded in Dinobot 2. Let's talk about Rampage for a second. First, we're gonna need some context. In one of the first season's more interesting filler episodes, we are introduced to a certain familiar character. Starscream, in fact. Specifically, this Starscream.
Wait a second.
You say?
Isn't G1 Starscream dead? Didn't he get summarily evaporated?
Why, yes, he did, suspiciously Slavic-sounding mushroom, which is why in Beast Wars, he's only a spark. However, in true Starscream fashion, his spark is apparently a bit anomalous, in that it is immortal. Why? Because it's Starscream. However, Starscream's body was destroyed when he quote-unquote died, meaning that his spark is forced to float around time and space for all eternity. He makes his way back to prehistoric Earth and possesses Waspinator for a while. It's a good episode. Anyways, the point is, he has an immortal spark. Now, somebody thought it would be a great idea to replicate Starscream's immortal spark, that somebody being some bureaucrat in the Maximal government. Instead, they created a monster, a psychotic and evil spark capable of committing horrific atrocities, that spark belonging to Rampage. Because they made his spark immortal, Rampage was sent with Optimus Primal and his crew on a stasis pod to be disposed with far, far away from Cybertron. Rampage is so dangerous that when he broke out of containment one time, he murdered an entire colony. depth charges, to be precise. So what you're telling me is that Rampage is so dangerous he has to be disposed with away from Cybertron, but the Maximals never considered experimenting with what would kill him? Is there no raw energon on Cybertron? Why does raw energon kill his immortal spark? Why did nobody consider that? They know that raw energon reacts with their bodies. They know it's both a source of life and power as well as pain and death. If anything were to kill him, it would be energon. In the following explosion of Rampage's near immortal spark, Depth Charge is also killed, now unable to keep the Nemesis from coming online. Megatron rises out of the ocean at the helm of the Decepticon warship, preparing to wreak havoc on the Maximals.
I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I am that which is, which was, and is yet to come. And you will know my name is Megatron when I lay my vengeance upon you.
While Tigerhawk and Optimus Primal engage the Nemesis, Primal orders Rhinox to engage in Project Eternity, to the confusion of the rest of the team, a plan that they compromised to get the Ark back online. Dinobot 2, on the other hand, is feeling a bit strange. With Rampage's spark no longer sequestered within him, he describes himself as feeling whole. While Primal returns to the team, Tigerhawk uses his Vok powers to create severe weather conditions, crippling the Nemesis. Dinobot 2 describes Tigerhawk as brave and noble, and it becomes clear that some semblance of his old personality is beginning to return. The Nemesis's power is too great for Tigerhawk, and he is slain. And to be fair, Tigerhawk with the power of the Vok is a bit overpowered. He was almost able to take down the Nemesis entirely on his own. I understand that they might have wrote themselves into a corner with how powerful he was, but I do think there was a better way to utilize him in this story. For example, have his Vok powers taken away when the Vok possession is sucked out of him. It makes sense, since it's probably their powers anyways, and both Tigatron and Airazor were capable bots on their own, and now they're together. Together, you'd think they'd perhaps be on par with some of the Transmetal cast. On Megatron's orders, Inferno and Quickstrike are attacking the Anthropoid settlement in the attempt to find a new base. The Nemesis comes across them, and Megatron prepares to settle his personal score with the Anthropoids. Dinobot suddenly remembers his death in the valley, protecting the early humans, as well as his honor, and tries to persuade Megatron to reserve their firepower. He is ignored, and Megatron fires anyways. Inferno and Quickstrike are obliterated in the explosion. The Maximals try to get the Ark online, but are unsuccessful and end up caught in the Nemesis's tractor beam. So Optimus Primal makes his way onto the Nemesis in order to fight Megatron one last time. He and Megatron duel, and Primal is defeated. Meanwhile, Megatron orders Dinobot to destroy the defenseless Ark, which he refuses to do, as he considers it an unfair and dishonorable fight. This buys the Maximals enough time to get to an Autobot shuttle, which Rhinox pilots and drives straight towards the Nemesis's bridge, kamikaze style. Although instead of dying, he splatters Megatron on the nose and destroys the bridge. Primal is able to escape and tries to get Dinobot to do the same, but Dinobot instead bids him farewell while standing on the bridge, dying like a badass for the second time. The whole timeline would be dead 2 times if it wasn't for Dinobot. Jeez. Once again, the most effective character in the series. But let's talk about Dinobot and Dinobot 2 for a second. Dinobot coming back, or at least sort of, for the finale is a pretty awesome moment, and it feels really satisfying that such a pivotal character gets to play one last large role. However, I do have some gripes about it. Firstly, why did Megatron think it was a good idea to make a brand new minion using Rampage's spark in the form of the most dangerous traitor he's ever had? And he's a lot. Dinobot was by far the most destructive being to the Predacons, possessing a strong intellect while being a powerful warrior and simply being too moral to control by Pred principles. Megatron didn't need to clone Dinobot. He could have made a completely new creature. Making Dinobot 2 was an obvious foreshadow, but feels like such a weird choice on Megatron's end. Secondarily, after Rampage's spark leaves Dinobot 2, why does he continue to function? He has no spark, which is what keeps a Transformer alive. If he had been reduced to a mindless golem, I could have bought that. But not only does he remain conscious, he seems to get his old personality back. Now, this actually has an explanation, in the form of a lost and non-canon episode. Shortly after Dinobot 2's introduction, there was actually an episode scripted that was called Dark Glass, which I am absolutely obligated to mention. In this episode, Rat Trap was depicted reacting to seeing his old friend in this new and unnatural form, and actually tries to download the old Dinobot into the new one, in an attempt to restore Dinobot to his old self. This was meant to explain Dinobot's sudden return once Rampage's spark was removed. The episode was deemed too dark and disturbing for the young audience that Beast Wars was aimed at, and it was instead replaced with a filler episode with the young anthropoid children. Why the same show that aired the episode Transmutate considered Dark Glass to be too disturbing is beyond me, especially when almost everybody in the fandom agrees that Beast Wars and Dinobot's final arc would have been exponentially better if Dark Glass had aired. Now with that, the Nemesis sinks into the ocean once again. The ark is safe, Megatron's forces destroyed, and Megatron himself captured. The remaining Maximals depart for Cybertron on the shuttle, which apparently possesses a transwarp drive as well, with Megatron in tow. Wait, what about G1 Megatron's spark? Are they just leaving with it? Aren't they gonna want to put that back? Wouldn't the timeline be in extreme jeopardy if left with Megatron? What if he decides to commit self-die, thus eradicating the entire timeline? Why couldn't they force him to give it back to G1 Megatron before they left? Because if the death of Optimus Prime destroyed both the Maximals and Predacons, the death of the original Megatron would too. Are we just not addressing that? The show ends with a panning shot down at the Anthropoid village, where they have now constructed huts and a few basic forms of technology. The early humans play with the remains of Quickstrike and Inferno, whilst Waspinator is seated on a throne above them and fanned with leaves, content at last to live a peaceful life, presumably as a demigod. I guess it never occurred to the Maximals to do a sweep and make sure that all the Predacons were dead? Even if Waspinator is now harmless? I mean, they don't know that, but whatever. All is well that ends well. And that's the story of Beast Wars. And I must say, I was quite surprised at how invested I got into it at one point. For how goofy it looks, it has this unusual ability to be genuinely compelling and interesting, especially with how nicely developed its cast is. Plot is, for the most part, solid, although as you just heard, I do have a fair amount of criticisms for it. There are things that simply don't make too much sense. Time travel is also another element that makes Beast Wars a little more difficult to swallow at times. I've never liked time traveling in media in general, just considering how messy it can get and the amount of possibilities and doors it opens. Time traveling, just like multiverses, can get very confusing at times, although Beast Wars handles it well for the most part. Aside from moments like the Vok trying to destroy Earth and yet also being angry about the timeline being meddled with. At the end of the day, the most destructive aspect of the Beast Wars' narrative is how the Vok are handled. They're a mysterious element for most of the story and just end up appearing in the last season anticlimactically in order to introduce Tigatron. Everything else is pretty excusable. Also, to be completely fair, the Maximals do have a ridiculous amount of plot armor from time to time. There are just times throughout the show where Megatron just should have won. The Maximals managed to pull it through some serious bullshittery. There is no reason that Black Arachnia should have survived this, and to be honest, the Maximals managing to get Optimus Prime back to functioning condition is like kinda a stretch. I mean, Megatron blasted his face off. And to be honest, I don't know why it didn't occur to Megatron to blast Optimus Prime directly in the spark chamber to begin with. It's an interesting story with an exciting narrative and genuine stakes, which I like a lot. You never know what Beast Wars will pull out next, whether it'll have you on the floor laughing or on the floor crying. I must say that one particular point in its favor is that it's never boring. Either the dialogue or the plot is enough to keep you invested, and that's assuming you don't just outright like the characters on screen. Oh yeah, speaking of the characters, why don't we talk about them for a little while? We've mentioned a few already, but let's dive in further. The characters in Beast Wars are surprisingly complex. Similarly to Transformers Prime, Beast Wars features a relatively small cast, likely due to how expensive 3D animation was at the time, each with distinct personalities and designs. They are well fleshed out and actually have a fair amount of development between them, often with interesting and innovative themes at play. The dynamics between both the Maximals and Predacons are actually quite natural, while being incredibly humorous as well. It makes them feel real and actually like real teams, the more fantastical and lighthearted atmosphere of the show aside. While there is no specific main character in the show, Rat Trap is certainly one of the best, and tends to be a rather strong focal point, with Dinobot being a close runner-up, until his death in Season 2. The two of them are an unlikely pair, being almost complete opposites in style and attitude, but yet they have excellent chemistry together. Dinobot is by far one of the most powerful characters I've ever seen, with the show's strongest and most inspiring arc. Black Arachnia, another Predacon turned Maximal, is also one of the best developed characters. Her journey from being one of the most despicable Predacons to one of the Maximal's greatest heroes being an intensely compelling and interesting one. On that same vein, Beast Wars has a very interesting outlook on the whole Autobots good, Decepticons bad, period, approach that some of the shows tend to get enveloped by. While for the most part the Maximals are considered good and the Predacons evil, Beast Wars makes sure to take into account not only exceptions, but that people can grow and that their nature is not necessarily inherent. Despite their rough edges, Dinobot and Black Arachnia change from genuinely wicked people to genuinely good people, with some hard work and adherence to their principles. In Dinobot's case, honor, and in Black Arachnia's, love. Alternatively, Quick Strike, a Maximal protoform, despite the fact that he wasn't reprogrammed as a Predacon, possesses a brutal and sadistic personality, implying that whether Maximal or Predacon, he would have been a rather bad person.
Does it all have to be quick? Because once we cripple him, I'd kind of like to enjoy their suffering for a while.
Nope.
Even Silverbolt, the most noble of all Maximals, nearly broke and impaled Tarantulas for almost killing Black Arachnia, which was framed as an incredibly brutal and unusually cruel act. Beast Wars depicts its characters as complicated and layered, aside from the ones that are meant to be a bit one-track, such as Inferno. I do wish Rhinox had gotten a little more personal work or screen time. He is the baseline, backbone of the team type character. For those who've watched Prime, you'll know he's kind of the Ratchet of the team. But whereas Ratchet gets a lot of screen time and love in Prime, Rhinox doesn't get nearly enough in Beast Wars. But there's also only so much you can jam into one show. The relationships between characters are well established and touching. Whether it be the romantic ones between Tigatron and Airraiser or Silverbolt and Black Arachnia, the deep attachment that Rampage had to transmutate, or the friendship that Dinobot and Rat Trap develop. Something worth mentioning is the rather mature view of romantic relationships and their various manifestations in Beast Wars, despite the considerably limited array of female characters, not accounting for the aforementioned Transmutate, who, although never mentioned in the show, would have been female if she'd managed to live beyond that episode, canonically. Airraiser and Tigatron are a very natural and sweet couple, slowly and subtly gaining feelings for each other, although mostly off-screen considering how little they tend to make an appearance in the first place. Silverbolt and Black Arachnia is a wonderful romance, pairing the nasty and treacherous Predacon with one of the most noble and pure-hearted Maximals possible, and the show makes sure to depict how this unusual circumstance affects them, and even changes them both for the long term. Beast Wars adds another touch of drama to the situation by implying Cheetor's crush on Black Arachnia, despite his feelings being unrequited, and the tension caused between him and Silverbolt as a result. Now, I tend to hate romance and romantic drama, but Beast Wars is subtle and sprinkles it in gently to add a touch of depth to its characters. I have no qualms with it and would go as far to say it actually makes the characters better in this case. Beast Wars never ceases to surprise. Whether it be the touching sacrifice, redemption and death of Dinobot, or the harrowing and tragic episode on the doomed Transmutate, who despite being nightmare fuel, had me absolutely sobbing at the end of her story. And the ability to make your viewers genuinely cry when you kill off your characters is an excellent sign. Speaking of killing off characters, I do want to give Beast Wars a very special kudos for having the ball bearings to do exactly that. Transmutate is a one-off character, and one we sadly do not get to spend much time with. Dinobot, on the other hand, is not only one of our main characters, but also a fan favorite. Knowing how difficult it can be to completely get rid of popular characters, I found Dinobot's death to be a particularly admirable addition to the show, especially since it wasn't done to cut costs or lay off a voice actor, and was part of a genuinely compelling arc. Pterosaur and Scorponok, who were admittedly not that popular to begin with, also take the short road to hell at the end of Season 1. Tarantulas and Rampage's deaths towards the end of the last season are also rather impactful, considering we've had them for a fair amount of the show. I must admit, however, that I feel like Depth Charge and Tigerhawk's deaths do not have so strong an impact, not nearly as much as they should have. Depth Charge is a very interesting character, and one of the few characters to have any strong backstory. His life is a tragic one. His mission is one of justice and vengeance for his murdered friends and family, slain at Rampage's hands. And, knowing Rampage and by some choice dialogue, it's also implied that some of them were tortured and eaten by him, which is pretty messed up, to say the least. However, due to time constraints in the third season and the strong adherence to the plot by that point, I feel like we never get to know Depth Charge. He works kind of like an independent, hunting Rampage, not dissimilar to how Tigatron wandered about in the wilderness despite being affiliated with the Maximals. That does automatically make it harder to get to know him, but we had a couple episodes that focused on Tigatron and got us acquainted with his personality and philosophical view of the world. If Tigatron had been killed instead of kidnapped, there would have been a significantly strong reaction, simply due to how long we've known him. Depth Charge never really elicited that kind of response, and considering how much nobody really mentions him or seems to remember him after his death, it didn't for the remaining Maximals either. Now, Depth Charge always was a bit of a lone wolf kind of character, but it definitely wasn't perfect characterization on his end. At least, however, he gets his justice. Similarly, Tigatron and Airraiser never really die, per se. But Tigerhawk is not exactly Tigatron and Airraiser, aside from his voice. We also don't get to spend any time with him, and we never get to see the team's reaction to seeing this strange amalgamation of their old friends again, aside from Cheetor and Optimus Primal. They never interact like they're greeting an old friend, and Tigerhawk doesn't live long enough for us to really glean what any of his personality might be like. When Tigerhawk dies, it's Tigatron and Airraiser dying. They're gone. Our old friends are gone. But it doesn't feel like they're gone. It doesn't feel like we actually lost Tigatron and Airraiser. They just kind of disappeared. Optimus Primal's anger at Tigatron's death is certainly touching, but just like with Depth Charge, nobody really mentions him after he's gone. Speaking of death, how in the world does death even work? Part of the reason I didn't notice Pterosaur and Scorponok's deaths was because the rules for death change constantly in Beast Wars, and it's honestly infuriating. Like, yes, we know that if a spark is extinguished, a Transformer dies. But what causes a spark to extinguish? Because it sure as hell isn't anything conventional, like it is for humans. Like decapitation or the loss of vital organs. For example, Waspinator can be squished into a cube, but stay alive. Bots can be dismembered, tossed about, crushed, and decapitated without being life-threatening. But a well-aimed shot to the chest is fatal. Only sometimes, though, when the plot needs it. But sometimes it doesn't matter. Or how Tarantulas' semi-death only comes once he's been thoroughly immolated, something that honestly shouldn't bother a metal Transformer anyways. But that's besides the point, as these ones are technically semi-organic. Transmutate dies from being blown apart. Never mind that we've seen Pterosaur get blown to bits several times. I'm honestly not even sure why Dinobot dies, although considering the total amount of firepower used to take him down, his case is maybe a little more believable. But seriously, these guys are nigh indestructible. I mean, imagine if humans just went into comas when they got mortally injured. The only reason Dinobot died was because he refused to go into the robo-coma to complete his mission. Why should these guys even fear death when their own weapons aren't really that effective against them? I guess that the fear lies in the fact that you don't know when your plot armor will kick in or not. To be fair, both sides do have facilities to regenerate themselves with, and at many moments there is a sense of urgency to getting injured bots to them in time. But at other times, there isn't. So it just causes viewers not to take injury too seriously. To be generous to this mechanic, however, it does make death more shocking when it does happen. And in the grand scheme of things, and considering how small the cast is, death happens a fair amount, and very suddenly. Now, though most of the characters in Beast Wars are very solid, some of the later additions to the cast are a lot less fleshed out. Quick Strike doesn't really get much time to shine, aside from his debut episode. Depicted as psychotic and impulsive, Quick Strike feels like a character that should be dangerous, aside from his admittedly amusing accent. And yet, he kinda bumbles around for the rest of the show, rarely gaining any victories or spotlights, despite the fact that he's not really the butt of the joke like Waspinator. This could, of course, be the writer's intention, but it really does feel unnatural with Quick Strike. Maybe the Predacons are only allowed one competent psycho at a time. Depth Charge, again, is another character whose development and overall presence I was rather unsatisfied with. I never understood why he was so quick to accept Optimus's offer to join the team. He doesn't reconcile with Optimus. He doesn't go through an arc where he actively realizes they need to work together. He accidentally gets into the position to help Rat Trap and then just decides to join the team. And from then on, he doesn't really have much of an interesting dynamic with the team. Silverbolt had a similar issue, but his situation made a lot more sense, considering his relationship with Black Arachnia already somewhat alienated him from everybody else, as much of his screen time was spent with her and focused on their relationship. I would also like to note, as a major plus to Beast Wars' characters, how intelligent they are throughout the show. There are some odd moments, such as forgetting about the golden record, or everybody always assuming their assailants are dead without ever confirming it. Occasional plot armor aside, the Maximals and Predacons genuinely apply battle tactics against each other and frequently attempt to exploit each other's weaknesses. While Megatron's tolerance of treachery is a bit off-putting at times, he tends to use the ambitions and tomfoolery of his subordinates to his advantage, in the manner of a true Decepticon. Characters are able to make logical conclusions with information presented to them pertaining to the plans of their enemies and comrades alike, in a very well-constructed manner. It's weird watching a show that is genuinely smart. Despite these minor criticisms of mine, I adore the characters and their writing in Beast Wars, and I can safely say that by the end of Season 2, I was fully invested and intrigued by every story that was unfolding between them. They're fun to watch, likable, and three-dimensional. Even the Predacons tend to have more going for them than bad guy is bad. All of this, I can appreciate. I dearly wish that some of our more modern media could learn a thing or two from Beast Wars, and a part of me thinks that perhaps even Transformers Prime pales in comparison to Beast Wars. But that is a subject for another day. On the subject of characters, something that is crucial to immersion in media is the ability of the actors, or in this case, voice actors, to properly portray their characters in a believable and entertaining manner. And imagine my surprise when I'm sitting here getting an eyeful of a show that looks like it's got the graphics of Star Fox 64, and I hear genuinely excellent voice performances from everybody. Beast Wars boasts a rather generous cast of voice actors for its characters, each of whom have significant amounts of voice acting experience and credits, the most famous of which is Scott McNeil, which I will admit was the only name I recognized with my limited knowledge. He's been in pretty much everything, but I know him as the voice actor for pretty much everybody in Dawn of War Soulstorm. He voices pretty much everybody in Beast Wars, too. Well, okay, not everybody. Only 4 characters, each with completely different personalities and voices. Listen, I like Steve Blum. A lot. But he always sounds like Steve Blum. Starscream? No, Steve Blum. Orochimaru? Haha, no, Steve Blum. Cyrus? No, Steve Blum. Scott McNeil, on the other hand, is a bottomless pit of voices, and his performances in Beast Wars were likely a humongous plus on his resume. Each character in Beast Wars has their gimmick, voice, mannerisms, and inflections, making them memorable and easy to recognize simply by their speech alone. The dialogue is absolute gold, and I found myself genuinely chuckling at times at the absurdity or cleverness of its jokes. Beast Wars has a humor that is neither heavy-handed nor crass, which is yet another breath of fresh air. As someone who tends to despise comedies, or what people tell me is comedy, I adore the humorous moments and callbacks. Some jokes are well-placed one-liners, while others are long-running references. And the constant innuendos, but robotified, are just great. I honestly want to do a little blurb on every voice actor in Beast Wars, as I absolutely love their performances, but I don't want to drag this video out any longer than it already is, so I'll leave it at that. But I leave you with this. Transformers has had some damn fine voice acting since the beginning. Now, you win some and you lose some, and while the voice acting may be wonderful, you'd have to be completely blind to look at the animation in Beast Wars and call it stellar by today's standards. There's no end to the wonky expressions, movements, and gestures throughout the show, making for stiff movement and very comical moments. The episodes are rife with animation errors and things that don't exactly make sense, like Cheetor grabbing things with his paws. You know, with those thumbs that cheetahs famously have. However, I think it's relatively fair to give Beast Wars a break, considering this was in 1996 and one of the very first 3D animated long-running projects. On top of that, the characters in Beast Wars actually look pretty good, with special attention to their expressions, lip syncing, and metal texture. For the time, this show looked spectacular, and there's no denying that. While somewhat jarring to watch in the current day, it didn't take long for me to adapt to the style and, while laughable at times, is not so distracting you can't genuinely enjoy the show. For some, its antique animation might actually be an attractive thing, as well as being a bit of a study for the progression of animation over the years. Not to mention that as the seasons progressed, the animation and textures actually seemed to get quite a bit better. Overall, I think the robots themselves looked quite excellent, whereas the animals looked a bit more on the odd side. And to be fair, they are still coming out with CGI movies and games that actually look worse. There's a few designs that I personally don't like, although in the grand scheme of things, most of them are pretty pleasant and overall look good. I do wish that Optimus didn't have this stupid mask hole. Like, he can put the mask over his mouth like G1 Optimus, but he doesn't often, and more often just has this dumb little hole. Why does it look like that? But that kind of thing is mainly up to preference, and I'd say that the designs of Beast Wars are not objectively unattractive, at least for the most part. So yes, while the animation looks like, well, this was incredibly good for the time. So tell me, what do you think Transformers as a franchise is about? Is it about funny robot men with their funny robot society? Is it about funny robot men who turn into trucks, or animals, or airplanes, or tapes? Is it about friendship, camaraderie, goodwill, and once upon a time, even American values? Or is it just some silly little story? Well, Transformers is all of those things. I won't deny it. But first and foremost, at its core, Transformers is about war. Its shows, comics, and games are all about the conflict between the Autobots and Decepticons, the complexities of their politics, and the consequences of their civil war on the people of Cybertron itself. For a kids' franchise, Transformers really tries to be realistic and human in its approach of war, although admittedly, some pieces of media do a better job than others. Beast Wars, on the other hand, is an excellent representation of war. With its many glories and tragedies, complexities and conflicts, Beast Wars pays special attention to the long-term effect on its cast. Amidst the plot, various themes are tossed back and forth about the ethics and meaning of war, explaining the difficult topics of its unpleasant inevitability. For the critic and cynic within all of us, Beast Wars boasts a good story, good characters, and a sensical approach that can carry its themes without being governed by them. After all, a story cannot be good solely on themes alone. Beast Wars is excellent, and I'm not even pulling your leg here. Beast Wars, despite its occasional bizarre inconsistencies like with the Vok, is an excellent show. So to answer the question in the title, is Beast Wars truly brilliant? Yes, it is. The love and effort put into constructing a genuine story with genuine characters is truly brilliant. And I thought for sure I'd find Beast Wars to be mediocre at best. But Beast Wars was anything but mediocre. And this has been Beast Wars, with somebody who barely knows anything about Transformers in the first place. I hope you enjoyed. This was an even longer project than my Prime video, and I do apologize for it taking so long. I do want to start making shorter discussion-style videos in between reviews, so as to keep my momentum going. So let me know in the comments what you might like to see discussed. And you folks can watch me stumble around in the dark as I try to understand more about Transformers. And also let me know what you thought of my summary, whether you agree or disagree with any of my points, and whether I missed anything. In my last video, you guys mentioned so many things I hadn't even thought about Prime, and of course I appreciate any feedback in general. Join me next time where I cover one of Transformers' newest additions to the franchise by the command of sweet democracy. His life is a tragic one, and his mission is one of justice and vengeance for his murdered friends and family, slain at Ratchet's hands. Holy shit, what's Ratchet been doing? God damn. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna turn around and desert you. There are just moments throughout the show where Mega Shark, what? Tarantulas and I have her name written down as Arachnid. I'm watching the wrong show. Despite the minor criticisms of mine, I adore the characters and their writing in Transformers Prime. Again, wrong show. Oh yeah, and I guess you should, like, describe. And with that, good people, I leave you.